We almost got stranded in the mountains.
Play the theme music. Hello and welcome to this episode of Tripology. I'm Alan and I'm here with the ever-cherry Adam.
Very enthusiastic intro. Alan, you sound like a man who's just had a very strong cup of masala chai.
Enthusiastic, in many ways, the antithetical adjective to cherry, because this week I'm describing you as a sort of cautious, perhaps suspicious, reluctant individual. Cherry, interesting word.
Yeah, I am risk averse.
Yeah.
And maybe that's harking back to my days in finance when I was working in risk management, but I'm a little bit apprehensive about some of the things you got us doing out here.
I sometimes think about that because me and you, we started a travel podcast because we both love to travel. We've been traveling for about 10 years. We've been traveling it all over, but goodness me, we couldn't have had more polar opposite starts in life. You, risk management, finance, me, a sort of long-haired, back-combed musician doing a Bachelor of Arts, in English.
Yeah, taking a risk on your career.
Exactly, yeah, taking the ultimate risk on my career by doing a degree that, quite frankly, made me a worse writer.
Well, the degree was in English language.
Yeah, it was.
Which
it
is
was
the
a
irony.
degree in English, and by the end of the degree, I could barely speak or write. So then I decided to go travelling instead. Just thought, F all this, go to China.
Yeah, being risk averse in a place like northern India, in the Himalayas, in the mountains, I don't know if it bodes well, but I'm able to relax here somewhat.
Yeah,
because of the.
Why
things...
do you think that is?
I don't know.
How are you relaxing so much? Is it the vitamin D? Is it the clean mountain air? Is it being so close to the bubbling stream?
Yeah, or is it the addiction to chocolate brownies I seem to have developed?
Interesting. I mean, people may not know, but my goodness, there's a very relaxing form of chocolate brownie that seems ever so prevalent here.
I know, and one of the reasons is, read between the lines, listeners, is because I don't and never really have smoked. So
marijuana.
Well, anything, cigarettes.
Right.
I don't like that as a way of ingesting any sort of high or consuming or whatever. So I grew up in a house of smoke, unfortunately, and it just wasn't really nice. And I think probably because of my childhood and my negative experiences, I'm very sensitive to the smell of smoke and don't like it.
So what you're saying is, for someone who doesn't like smoke, but, just arbitrarily, smoke sometimes helps people relax.
Yeah.
If you don't like smoke, maybe have a delicious chocolate treat that's available here that has similar, albeit slightly different effects.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who knows about northern India knows that there's a lot of marijuana grown here.
Yes.
A lot of it is wild. Yeah. A lot of it is wild. We don't mean crazy. We mean like actually of the wilderness.
Yeah, and also a little bit crazy, but you'll walk down the road and see these wild cannabis plants.
Which has taken me kind of by surprise because I didn't really know a lot about this region. And hash seems to be incredibly prevalent.
Yeah, now hash is basically a compound that's made by rubbing the marijuana until the resin comes out, and then
it's resin.
You mix it all up. Yeah, exactly. Whereas, I've only really ever been exposed to the flower before.
Right, okay. Yeah, I mean, I've never rolled a joint in my entire life. I wouldn't even know where to start.
You don't like smoke, but you have been consuming.
Because as we know, as Tripology's resident foodie, chuck it in a piece of food.
And you're all the merrier. Now, important to say that THC is the compound that gets you high when you're smoking it.
That's why I love doing this podcast with you, Alan, because you know.
Exactly. When you're eating it, it's 11-hydroxy metabolite, a different substance. There's a very, very different psychoactive effect.
Okay.
And it's different, but you've been enjoying it.
I have. I've been very relaxed. I've been taking in the surroundings. Being somewhere that is a place of natural beauty, I would say is almost imperative to achieving the ultimate experience.
Yeah, exactly. So you've been feeling like taking these brownies has offered you a slightly different perspective. You've been able to wander amongst the mountains, have an enjoyable time, let your thoughts clear.
Yeah, because it is, as we said on the previous episode, it's part of the culture here, isn't it?
Very much
You
so.
can't move for people smoking up or eating brownies. Every cafe does special versions of anything, and you can have it in a pancake, a pizza, a brownie, or whatever.
I would say it's probably the most ubiquitous part of mountain culture in India, from what I can tell. It seems to be the thing that everyone is engaged in. Seems to be hanging out in the mountains, smoking pot and eating brownies is the done thing, and a very very right to.
Because we've actually found it quite rare to be on a trekking path and cross anyone for that matter. But if you go to a little village, you will find huge groups of people that are just relaxing, as it were.
Listen, on this podcast, I want it to be the backpacking podcast. I want it to be the podcast that everyone goes to. If you're going to go backpacking, you should listen to Tripology.
Yeah.
People do a lot of stuff while they're traveling, and drugs is one of them.
It is. It's
undeniably.
Yeah, I was going to say part and parcel, but I was a little bit worried about hopping the mic. I do think it's all par for the course, isn't it?
It's definitely par for the course. Something that people do. If you want to do smoke some weed, the mountains in India is a place that you can go to do it and relax.
And it doesn't really matter where you are either. I think if you're in Europe, if you're in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, of course, if you're in South America, without doubt, it's something that you're going to have to either avoid or, be exposed to at some point, I would imagine, within the backpacking community.
Yeah, and I actually think that marijuana in moderation can be a really, really beautiful thing. It can really help you relax. It can really, really help you, just look at things from a different perspective. If there's things that are bothering you, then, maybe it can help open some doors. I'm someone who doesn't like to partake. You know me, I don't really drink alcohol.
Not really.
Not much of a party person.
Not as much as I'd like.
Yeah. Not much of a party person.
No.
Don't use any drugs recreationally.
No.
Marijuana is something that every now and again I think can be really, really useful.
Cool. Yeah, and it's strange because the headspace I'm in at the moment is like obviously wanting to tread very carefully here.
Right.
And treat it sensitively. However, I have just lived the last 3.5 years in a country where it's completely legal.
Yeah, I think
so what am I even bothered about?
As a team, as humanity, we've kind of got to get over the idea that, this thing's illegal, this thing's not, because we're talking about a plant that grows. I mean, I'm literally looking out of the window in front of me and I can see some marijuana plants.
Yeah.
So let's all grow up a little bit. It's something. Why is it that I can talk so openly about the fact that someone went to get a beer the other night, but then suddenly we're talking about this thing that's growing 100 meters from me and requires far less processing than a beer would, and yet that's somehow taboo subject. No, we just get over it. It's something. It's it's ubiquitous part of the culture.
Yeah, and it just happens, and it's certainly something you should expect to come across if you are in this region.
Yeah, but I described you as chary, cautious, and something that I mentioned that I don't really partake in recreational drug use that often, and marijuana is something that's very occasional for me. I don't really like it. I sometimes get a little bit in my own head on the old drugs. I get a little bit anxious. Yeah. So sometimes I'd like to really do it in moderation. You're a little bit better at that sort of thing than I am, I think.
Well, I don't know if that's maybe because I've got you next to me who's not partaking.
Right.
So
I'm a bit like a trip sitter. I'm like a comforting,
safety net kind of. It makes my experience easier because I know that you're looking after me. And I mean, maybe that paints me in a bad light because it's only been very recent, hasn't it?
No, I don't think it paints you in a bad light at all. I think it's just like we're a team. That's something as well to get across, is like when you're traveling, you're a team and we're a team. So on one occasion, we decided to go out on a little hike in the mountains.
Yeah.
I had a little break, a day off. I just wanted to go and do some hiking. But you decided, perfect opportunity, I'll partake in a little brownie.
Yeah. Little brownie, start the day the right way, and get out into the open with your old best mate who's not having a brownie.
No, and clear as anything my mind was, almost too clear.
Yeah,
so sharp.
Spoke to the lovely gentleman who was running the hostel that we were staying at and said, how should we spend our time? Oh, it's a little 6-hour round trip hikey poo you can do.
He said it's no problem. Because we were in a larger group. The people we were with, they just wanted a day off from the hiking.
Yeah.
Just a little sojourn. But we thought we're going to use this opportunity, go quite quick. We can make it this 6-hour round trip to Glacier Point, which sounds amazing, Glacier.
So it's the jumping off point is Tosh, isn't it? Am I pronouncing that right? Tosh, I think. In Himachal Pradesh. So beautiful area, isn't it? I mean, a lot of these villages, these mountainside villages, they kind of look the same with slightly different perspectives on mountains, I guess. But I think if you really like one, you're bound to like most.
And Tosh was a little bit resorty, I felt.
A bit tacky.
It was good to get out of Tosh and do some hiking. That's how I felt about it. I just wanted to spend a day really in the wilderness with my best friend. Yeah,
you can't move for waterfalls and beautiful scenery. I mean, it was an exceptional hike up until the moment I started to get concerned that we had gone the wrong way.
you did get a little bit concerned. And I know that you're a risk-averse person anyway at the best of times if you're completely sober.
Yeah.
But I could sense there was a little bit of anxiety creeping in.
So yeah, let's paint the picture. I'd had a brownie for breakfast. We know that sometimes anxieties are an issue or something that needs to be managed if you are taking edibles or whatever. And it wasn't getting dark, but we were 3 hours away from where we'd started, and it was mid-afternoon. So
yeah, and so some anxious thoughts started creeping in a little bit, didn't they? It was like, Alan, you said to me, do you think that we're going to get back in time?
Yeah. Well, I'm really trying to, I guess, justify my side of the story and rationalize the way I was feeling. We were also going through some terrain where the path wasn't obvious.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpick here because firstly, I want to talk about the hike itself, because I think it was a fun hike.
Yeah.
It was a fairly challenging hike.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those hikes where the path was occasionally not very clear, but with a little bit of experience and forward planning, you could sort of navigate quite safely.
And there's something else I want to add as well. We ran out of water very early on, and it was ripping hot and sunny.
There was enough for you to be anxious about. In hindsight, there was enough for you to be anxious about, especially in an altered state.
Yeah.
So these questions started creeping in with increasing frequency. Like, Alan, do you think dehydration might be an issue? Alan, are we going to get back in time? Alan, do you think maybe we're going to die? And
I also think as well that we often underestimate just how much of a difference light makes. Because usually we're assessing this kind of thing in the light and thinking, oh, if it gets a little bit darker or if the sun sets, I'll still be able to find my way. But especially in the mountains or in jungles where there's thick forest as well, it doesn't need to get that dark before it gets almost pitch black. And then the light on your phone's doing almost nothing.
Yeah. So we're walking. We go across a glacier, actually walk on the glacier to a different side. We walk up, scramble up these rocks to an old disused tunnel, which
crazy,
dark and empty.
Well, we found out afterwards that there's a chance that would have been like
a dam hole where water would come and fly out of. We go down this ravine, we hike up this other river, we end up pushing forward. We basically went as far as we could to this viewpoint. Your anxiety about nightfall ever increasing. How do you think I responded to you in those scenarios? Was I the trip sister that you needed me to be? Was I the hiking partner that you needed to be?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I felt like you had control. I had to basically give up all control, and not necessarily because I was in the state I was in, but just because I thought we were going wrong and we wouldn't be able to get back or whatever. But you were so sure that we would.
Yes.
And I trust you.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I was just like, it's going to be fine. Stop thinking about it and maybe enjoy the scenery. And don't think about how dry your mouth is.
I think it probably highlights that. It probably wouldn't have been safe had we both taken the brownie.
Yeah.
Because I will say this, I felt confident and I've done a lot of hiking and I was really mapping, I was making waypoints in my mind. You know, I was thinking, I do this thing when it's a sort of a spurious route where I'll see something and make an absurdity of it. So that when I see it the next time, it's clear that I've been there before. Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. There was someone I used to work with actually who used to frequently lose their car keys.
Right.
So whenever they put them down, they imagined them exploding.
Yeah, exactly. I saw a bottle on the ground and I imagined it whizzing off like someone letting air out of a balloon. So then when I saw that bottle again, I was like, I know I've seen that bottle.
Yeah, cool. So it's, you build a little story in your head.
Exactly. So I was confident, but I also... It was a fairly challenging route and I was wanting to not increase your anxiety at all.
It was also really diverse, wasn't it? Like we went through a number of different types of terrain. We went through open plains. We went over mountains that looked quite similar to the last one. We went through thick forest where the path just dissipated into nothing.
When you were at the peak of your concern, you got some twigs from a nearby path and created an arrow pointing in one direction. So you're like, now we'll know that we're supposed to go this way.
Breadcrumbs, yeah.
I was like, we can't be relying on bracken arrows. But yeah, it's interesting. But it was all fine, wasn't it, man? What did you think of the hike? The view was incredible.
It was breathtaking. Yeah, I think it just goes to show, doesn't it, how much your mindset impacts your experience.
Yeah.
Because I actually had nothing to worry about because 4 hours later, we got back with more than enough time to spare. It was light. We managed to find some water on the way back, luckily. But sitting on that rock, just taking the scenery in, after being sort of worried or a little bit sideways because of the brownie or whatever. It was just an awesome experience. I felt like we really worked hard for that.
What insights do you think you had because you'd taken the brownie that you might not have had you not?
Oh, well, I've got no idea.
Big
really.
question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a massive question.
Do you think that it was obviously a different experience because you'd taken the brownie?
Yeah.
It was like more beautiful, do you think?
I think some parts were more beautiful, yeah. Yeah, I was maybe a little bit introspective on the way. I was trying to like fight the feeling of, being anxious about not just trying to be present.
I think sometimes that is the challenge of these things is like the not necessarily the worst parts of yourself, but the least confident, the most anxious. You had to put your faith in me to like find the right path. You have to kind of combat some like negative emotions and feelings. And sometimes that is its own reward with these things.
Yeah, and that negativity is easily, like you can observe that, I suppose, is maybe the best way to put it, because I was thinking, oh God, what happens if we roll our ankles? What happens if, you're the one who's going to get us back, but if you trip and fall or whatever, what am I going to do? And then it gets dark and our phones run out of battery and then, we haven't got any water. I was thinking, well, hang on, none of that has happened.
It's like thoughts that you would normally be able to dismiss really easily. Yeah. Because you're in an altered state, they become harder to dismiss. Well, I'll tell you this. We, on the way back, we saw the path that we should have taken. We did actually go the wrong way.
We went the alternative, less trodden path, but it was.
I saw the path to Glacier Point. It was a lovely little stroll, very easy, very clearly marked. No over glaciers, over rivers, into abandoned dam holes and all that stuff.
Well, with other people on it as well. We viewed from a distance across the valley that there were lots of other hikers going on that path, and then that's when it obviously sets in.
Yeah, so we went the wrong way.
Yeah, we went the wrong way.
Basically, we went the wrong way, guys.
Yeah,
but that
trailblazers,
better journey because we went the wrong way. More challenging, more difficult, more interesting, more stuff to do, and good that we are just friends and looking after each other and went together. And that is the concept that I want this week for us to meditate on. Unlike a wandering mind under the influence, hiking through the mountains, allow your conscious mind to return into your brain box from the meditation break. Adam, let me tell you something.
Go on.
One of my key things I was excited about when I started this podcast with you was the fact that we get to interact with an ever-increasing audience of backpackers, tripologists, people who are doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
We had this idea, didn't we, of us sitting like the elder statesmen of travel in Hostel Common Room and people coming and asking us all sorts of questions like, my goodness, what's the best rain jacket that you could possibly wear if you were going to a windy region? Oh, what's the best fabric that a beanie should be made out of if you're going and hiking in Patagonia? That sort of stuff, yeah?
Yeah.
Exactly. So this is the item on the podcast called Hostel Common Room. Play the theme music.
Hostel Common Room. How many countries you been to, mate?
Hostel Common Room. My goodness. My favourite item is where tripologists, fans of the show, they email us, tripologypodcast@gmail.com, asking any question that you can think of about travel.
Yeah, and then we've had a little email into the inbox, Alan. I'd love to share it with you because it's an amazing question. I think you're going to love it.
I want to hear it. Lay it on me. I'm going to think about it and I'm going to respond accordingly.
Okay, cool. It's from James in Virginia. Hello,
Virginia.
James.
Oh my God, an American.
Thanks ever so much for writing it. It's amazing. We love to hear from you. So the email starts, the subject line, hello, here we go, travel with pets.
Okay.
You ready for it?
I'm ready for it. Yeah. Something near and dear to my heart.
He loves animals. So James starts with, hello, scholars of the tripological arts. Sounds like you've written it. I am a fellow traveller of the world. I recently finished a trip around the world, backpacking over 8 months to places like England, Turkey, Korea, Japan, Guatemala, and Argentina.
Nice. Congratulations on your wonderful trip.
That's really cool. James goes on and says, I did this whole trip while having a dog at home in the US. I had someone I paid money to, which I saved up for and planned on doing to watch my dog for the entirety of my trip. She lived in a very rural part of Virginia, and it was an easy way for her to earn some money, and it served my need for travel. Someone to watch my dog, of course. Now that I'm back, I have my dog again, and I love her. I wouldn't think of giving her to anyone. My question is, do you think what I did was something you'd morally agree with?
Okay, morally.
Having someone watch your pet while travelling long term, I'm sure this affects many, many people, James. I'd say, he goes on, I'd say it's obvious that you can't travel with pets, at least not what I did and where I went. Okay. Would have been cool to see her on top of a volcano, though.
Yeah, a dog on a volcano. Oh, my goodness, what an image. He's right. I think that it is obvious that you can't do the kind of travel that he was doing with a pet. I think obviously a pet presents a kind of barrier to doing the kind of travel that we do.
Yeah, there are also very famous Instagram accounts and other influencers and bloggers who do travel with dogs, cats, or both in vans.
But it's a different thing, isn't it? Like transcontinental travel, going to multiple countries, a pet can only present a barrier or a border crossing, for example. But there are people that do it. There's definitely kinds of travelers, influencers who are all about traveling with pets. That is a thing. Mm-hmm. But specifically talking the kind of travel that we do, long-term travel across many different countries, different continents. Yeah. Is it moral to do that and have a pet? Now then. I'm an animal lover.
You are?
I'm Tripology's resident animal lover. Mm-hmm. Not, you love animals as well.
I love them as much as the next guy, unless the next guy's you.
A big thing for me is like a lot of the volunteer work I do whilst traveling is with animals, rehabilitation, that sort of thing.
Don't take them with you though, do you?
Don't take them with me. No, that's true. So this is a question that I feel very close to.
Yeah.
And I want to answer with kind of due diligence. I'll say this. Mm-hmm. I think when you decide to have a pet.
Yes.
It can be for a number of different reasons. Perhaps you've rescuing an animal.
Yeah, great reason.
Perhaps you're just getting a dog because you want companionship and you've gone to a breed or something like that. There's lots of different contexts that people have animals in. Some people, they maybe didn't plan on having a dog, but a dog winds up in their lives and then they suddenly have to deal with that, having a 9-to-5 job, traveling. Yeah, we have to build our lives around our animals once we have them.
Yes, agreed, because they've got a life expectancy and it's usually a long one. If it's a dog or a cat, you're talking, 8 to 12 years?
Yes. Now, I'll say this. I think that your obligations to that animal are numerous.
Yeah.
You have to provide it with the necessary things that it needs to have a good and healthy life, which are like food, water, that sort of thing.
Sure.
And you also have an obligation to provide that animal with love.
Yes, I agree.
That being the case, that maybe perhaps on Maslow's hierarchy of need for the dog is as important as food and water. I think that's the environment you bring it into. You need to look after it in terms of its medical necessities and also be a loving companion and owner to that animal, cat, dog, goldfish, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. If it is a dog, giving it the exercise it needs, the stimulation, the playtime, and all the food and water and all that kind of stuff. Hell of an answer for this question.
Yeah. Now, saying that, James also wants to travel.
Yeah.
I think, given that he wants to travel and has a dog that he clearly loves very much, he sounds like he did everything that he could possibly do to ensure that that dog's needs were met in terms of he paid someone to provide it with everything it needed.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he paid someone to spend time with that dog, look after them, show that dog love and affection.
Yeah.
I think if you want to travel and have a pet, he did it the most moral and ethical way that a person could do it. He obviously cares enough that he made sure there are very clear things in place to do that.
Yeah, it sounds like a win-win-win, hopefully. Hopefully the dog had an amazing time. The answer to this question from me, James, and anyone listening, this is going to be quite funny because a number of my friends who listen to the podcast know that I've got quite strong opinions on this. For me, I wouldn't get a pet if I knew that I was going to travel the way we do. Right. I think.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that maybe James felt that way. Maybe he wanted to travel after already having the dog. So
because you prioritize travel above all else, and you think that a dog basically presents a barrier that would be difficult to succumb.
Yeah, I very deliberately don't have any pets. And I think that would always be my advice because I see... It's going to sound harsh, mate, and I do want people to understand this is my own view, but I do think that having a pet is a restriction that I'm not willing to sort of manage as I go.
Yeah.
I think that for me, a pet would be something that I can see in my life in the future, perhaps, but it will be when I know I'm not going to travel for extended periods.
Yes.
I mean, 8 months is a hell of a long time, but if the dog had everything it needed in abundance, then who am I to say that that isn't morally a good decision?
Yeah, well, totally. Like, I'm someone who would obviously love very much to have a pet. I'd absolutely love animals. I would love to have animals in my life with more frequency. I can't have an animal because all I do all the time is travel.
Yeah.
James's situation maybe is quite different, is that he has had this dog for a number of years, has then decided he's at a point in his life where he wants to travel for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And is now wondering whether that was, what's best for the dog, whether, that's something that's morally okay. I would argue, life evolves and things change and things happen. And we've got to be tolerant and understanding of that. I think that in that set of circumstances, the best you can do for the animal is make sure there's a consistent person that can provide them with everything they need.
Yeah, so it can't be binary, can it? I mean, it has to be treated on a case-by-case basis. And I think, do I want to say that if what you want to do is backpack for months on end, maybe getting a pet isn't the correct answer?
Well, definitely not. I think that's totally legitimate to say. I think if you're at a point where you have no animals, and you want to go prioritize travel in your life, it's not a good idea to get an animal. And that's okay to say.
Yeah, cool.
I think also a world exists where you have lived a life and one of the things in your life is an animal. You might also have a mortgage and a load of possessions and all these things that don't require as much love, but are also considerations.
Yeah.
And then you decide that you want to go traveling. You have to figure that out. You might have to solve a bunch of different things that make you then able to go traveling. A dog, an animal, is a very, very complicated thing to sort out because it obviously requires more love and care than, say, your mortgage, so there's an emotional attachment aspect. Yeah.
I also think that in sort of a broader sense, maybe we're not the best people to ask about traveling with pets, of course. But I know that how I feel about having a pet is like it is a restriction. We live very streamlined existences. And I think
neither of us have kids. Neither of us have any possessions that we don't carry with us.
No. So for me, just the thought of having to check in on a dog or a cat, or, for that to be something that I have to regularly think about, that maybe, James hasn't talked about how much he missed the dog. I'm sure he missed it an immense amount. And I'm sure the dog, sometimes you see these like Instagram reels of someone from maybe the forces, like the army coming back. The dog's like absolutely elated, wagging its tail. It's just like its head's going to explode or something crazy. But
I'm sure the dog missed him as well.
Yeah, so I don't know. Having pets is such a complicated thing, especially when it is within the context of travel. I would, if someone, here you go, here's a question for you off the back of James' email.
Yeah.
Is it fair to say that if someone came to us and said, look, I'd love to backpack around the world and have the sort of freedom that you guys maybe have, but I also want a pet, what would your advice be? I think I would lean towards saying, I don't think it's a good idea you get a pet.
I think it's a matter of priorities, because what a lot of people want to do is go traveling for a few months and then go back home.
Right.
And I think it's very, very, very possible to do that and have a pet. I think there are a lot of benefits to having a pet. I think you can have a pet in a really ethical way. You can rescue animals. You can do all that stuff. Not many people want to live the lives that we live. I'm friends with people at the moment who they would love to go traveling, but they can only travel for 6 months at a time max because they have animals that they need to get back to, and they have friends that can look after them for periods of time, but then they need to step in. It's like situations, we don't live in a vacuum. Things aren't always ideal.
All right. Well, let me throw a curvy one at you. Let's say that James had a dog that he's looked after for a number of years or months or whatever, loved it very much, but then decided to go backpacking and actually gave the dog away or rehomed it as opposed to took it back. Because I wonder whether the reason why this is morally acceptable or why it's maybe not as bad as it seems is because he took the dog back.
And actually said he could never think of giving it up to anyone else, right? Because he loves the animal.
Yeah. So, I don't know, it's a sensitive one, but, would it be any worse or would we feel any differently about it if someone just had a pet and then not overnight, but maybe they've been planning to go away and they thought, actually, I might just give this dog away so that I can go backpacking and not think about it.
It's an elective change in circumstance, because there's a lot of situations where things happen beyond people's control that then mean they have to give a dog away. Like, let's say they lose their job and they no longer have the money to look after the animal, or they become physically disabled or something, they can't walk the dog. There's lots of circumstances. This one's just an elective thing, and for James it was temporary, so I think he did what he needed to do and then came back.
But if the question is, they just decide over a number of weeks that they fancy backpacking for a number of months and then decide to give the dog away, it's a difficult one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is a little bit rough, and it's a question of priority. That in that context, you'd then be prioritizing yourself and your desire to go traveling over the potential distress it might cause the animal to be given away.
I suppose the justification would be that if you decide to do that and you want that for yourself, if what you're then trying to do by rehoming the dog is give it the best life it can have without you in the picture, maybe that's also okay.
Yeah. Look, I think it is a complex ethical, moral issue
that affects many different people. So send us an email.
Lots of different travelers. I think it's important to have this discussion at length because it affects a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
I think, send us an email, tripologypodcast@gmail.com, if it affects you. My hard, fast line for James is that I think he did probably the best he could in the situation. I think that
for all involved,
I think that he did the right thing. He paid someone to really look after his animal, and now he's back there with his animal, and maybe I'm sure that situation sounds like it worked really, really well. So congrats to James for being a responsible, loving, caring dog owner, really, from my perspective.
Yeah, an amazing question. Thanks so much for writing in, James, and send in another one about your travels. We'd love to hear some crazy stories from the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing, man.
Wicked
That's
stuff.
it. So we're still here in the mountains. Mm-hmm. We're doing some crazy stuff in the next coming weeks. You're shooting off, aren't you, soon?
Sounds like I'm maybe going to Delhi.
Yeah, and I'm shooting off, and then we'll meet up. It's going to be all wild. It's going to be crazy. Still in India, doing all kinds of crazy travel things. We're going to blast off to the Patreon section. Patreon.com/tripologypodcast. There's a show after the show.
Where it gets even more relaxed, if you can believe it.
It gets even crazier than this. So we will blast off there now.
See you there.
Bye.